Hey everyone, do you remember the original Moto G? It single-handedly shook up the entry-level market, changing our idea of what $200 phones should be able to do. In the following years, the Moto G models have seen great success in European and American markets, and while the company lost a lot of market share lately, it still has influence over the entry-level and mid-range markets. Over 7 years later, 5G has now made it to Motorola's budget G lineup, and the Moto G 5G Plus is here with a 90Hz LCD screen, a beefy 5000 mAh battery, and the Snapdragon 765G chipset. So with all the other smartphones coming out using the same processor, does this one stand out enough? I'm Ricky with GSM Arena, and this is our review of the Moto G 5G Plus. At first glance, the G5G Plus may look like a bunch of other phones, but after you spend some time with it, you'll notice a couple of unique elements that let it stand out. Starting from the front, there's a tall LCD screen with thin bezels all the way around. The upper and lower ones are a bit thicker, but they're at least consistently sized with each other. Meanwhile, there are dual punch hole cutouts for the selfie cameras. More on these later. Around the back is a quad camera setup arranged in an iPhone-esque fashion. The dual LED flash and the Moto Batwing are pretty hard to miss as well. On the right side is the power button with embedded fingerprint scanner and the volume rocker. They're placed pretty high up there, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue for anyone with average-sized hands. Do keep in mind that the aspect ratio of the screen makes this one tall smartphone. And at the bottom, there's a downward speaker, USB-C charging port, and 3.5mm headphone jack. The G5G Plus feels great in the hand, with nice tapered edges on the back. Even though the frame and backside are made of plastic, the dot matrix finish of this blue model looks great and provides better grip here compared to real glass. Although the Moto G 5G Plus is not officially water resistant, the phone's internals are protected by a splash-resistant nano coating, so occasional splashes should be fine. The screen is a 6.7-inch LCD panel with a 90Hz refresh rate and Full HD Plus resolution in the cinematic 21:9 aspect ratio. In terms of brightness, the G5G Plus reached 443 nits in the manual mode and pushed out 543 nits in super bright environments when set to automatic. We do wish it was a bit brighter, but it should be bright enough for most viewing conditions. When it comes to color accuracy though, this isn't the best screen we've seen. Its default saturated mode has very cool whites and grays and overly saturated colors. Natural mode renders more accurate colors, but max brightness takes a hit. Since this display can render at up to 90Hz, there's a new AI control option to let the software decide when to activate the 90Hz refresh rate. So if you're watching a video or seeing a static image on the screen, the display switches to 60Hz to save power, and then kicks back in when you swipe around. Pretty neat. Thanks to the phone's huge 5000 mAh battery, we calculated a 114-hour endurance rating overall, with more than 17 hours of video playback and just under 15 hours in our web test. As far as charging goes, the G5G Plus supports 20-watt USB-C power delivery, and it recharged to 35% in 30 minutes. It took 2 hours and 10 minutes to get to a full charge, which is kinda slow, but the high endurance score makes up for that. There's a single downward firing speaker, and it's nothing special. It scored average in our loudness test, and from a company like Motorola, we would have expected a louder speaker. This phone, like a bunch of other mid-rangers in 2020, is powered by the Snapdragon 765. 5G support, great battery life, and smooth software are all expected, and it delivers on everyday performance. Games run smoothly as well. If you're after a near stock Android experience, you'll like the software on the G5G Plus. Motorola's has changed a little bit and has only added a few features, which boost the experience without cluttering the interface. Moto Actions are gestures and actions that trigger apps or shortcuts. The double twist to open the camera, the double chop to fire up the flashlight, and the lift to unlock are all well familiar at this point, and they're just as useful as when they first launched. Moto now lets you further customize the look of the interface. You can now change the accent colors and shape of the quick toggles, and you can set the desired font and icon pack. There's a new Power Touch feature that's kind of like Samsung's Edge panel, but you access it by double pressing on the power button. You can customize which apps and shortcuts appear in this menu. The fingerprint scanner, while quick and responsive for the most part, doesn't always work on the first read. Just make sure you firmly press on the sensor, which we found to give us more consistent reads. There are a total of 6 cameras on the Moto G 5G Plus, 4 in the back and 2 in the front. The main one is a 48 megapixel sensor with an f1.8 aperture, and it sits alongside an ultra-wide 8 megapixel camera, a 5 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. The camera UI has been simplified to display 3 modes: photo, video, and the most recent other mode. The other modes are in a separate menu. The main camera took nice shots with decent detail levels and very good dynamic range, with pleasing colors and contrast. Sharpness is balanced, so detail is well highlighted without any halo effect. The ultra-wide camera is consistent with the main camera in colors and contrast, but the detail levels aren't quite as good. The 5 megapixel macro camera has autofocus, which makes taking close-up shots a lot easier. Macro shots are sharp, and you don't have to be too close to get a clear shot. Details and sharpness are not bad, and colors are average. As the sun goes down, the image quality goes down along with it. In lower light conditions, photos are decidedly soft and rather noisy. Even with HDR, the Moto G 5G Plus can't seem to figure out how to get proper exposure in these scenes, and shadow areas get lost. Night vision does help a lot with the exposure and detail levels, although there is still some noise present. If the scene allows for it, we would use night vision for every low light shot. As for the ultra-wide camera, we cannot recommend using it at night. Its output is pretty bad, and there's no night vision available to help it. Portrait photos are missing sharpness, and the HDR processing doesn't go all in. Otherwise, we don't mind the colors, the level of details, and the average edge detection. Still, the portraits are noisy, regardless of how much light there is. The Moto G 5G Plus has 2 selfie cameras, a 16 megapixel standard unit with f2.0 aperture, and an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera, for when you need to fit more of your friends in the frame. Selfies look good for the most part. Faces are well exposed, even in more challenging light. Detail levels aren't spectacular, but skin tones are pleasingly rendered. Dynamic range is rather limited, and noise is more of an issue than the main camera. But all in all, it's not a bad effort. Ultra-wide selfies have about the same level of sharpness per pixel, but with half the resolution available, it's unable to resolve nearly as much detail. At least it manages to keep up with the other camera in terms of color rendering. Portrait selfies are not great, with mediocre subject separation at best. It sometimes misses with simple hairstyles, while messier hair is totally beyond its capability. The G5G Plus can record up to 4K resolution video in 30 frames per second, or 1080p video at 60 frames per second. 4K video is nicely detailed with good contrast and dynamic range. You also get EIS, which somewhat strangely causes a significant drop in the bitrate, and that causes a drop in sharpness, but the overall quality remains solid. The lower bitrate might cause issues with particularly dynamic scenes. Full HD videos lack detail and come out with muted colors. Overall, we would keep away from using this mode, unless you really need to be saving storage space. There is a lot of fierce competition in this affordable mid-range segment. The Moto G 5G Plus is competitively priced with excellent battery life, a smooth screen, snappy software, and support for 5G networks. Currently, there are 2 big competitors close to the G 5G Plus in price using the same chipset, and one of them is the Xiaomi Mi Note 10 Lite. It has a sharper OLED screen and similar battery life for €50 cheaper, but it's missing a headphone jack and micro SD card slot. Then there's the trade-off of whether you want a heavy Android skin like MIUI or a cleaner Android experience like the Moto. Then there's the OnePlus Nord, which is €50 more than the Moto with better camera hardware and an OLED screen with in-display fingerprint scanner, but it has a smaller battery and no headphone jack. Also, do keep in mind that in this price range, a difference of just €50 can be a deal breaker. If the cameras were a bit better on the Moto, it would be a perfect deal. But even with the camera that it has, the Moto G 5G Plus is a very affordable 5G smartphone that's well-rounded in software, battery life, and overall experience, and well worth the price. I'm Ricky with GSM Arena, and thanks for watching. Take care, everyone.